Well, now that you know that you have a Louisiana iris, we're going to talk to you about the culture, how to grow it. This plant is the easiest plant in the world to grow, partially because it's native here, but partially because so many of our hybridizers, like Patrick O'Connor, who has hybridized over 150 different cultivars, we have a wonderful selection to choose from to put in our gardens. This is April 1st, and April 1st is the time we normally go to all of our gardens in this area, and we look at the irises and we determine which ones we would like to grow in our garden. They will be blooming in late March, April, and even into May. So here's your chance. Get out, go to Longview, go to the Sculpture Garden, go to Burden, see these plants, and decide which ones in addition you would like to have in your garden. They are very easy to grow, and I see right now they are blooming. So let's look at some of the blooms, and let's look at some. This is called President Henley. President Henley, if you want the largest Louisiana iris flower, you want President Henley. President Henley is grown as a hybrid, and it's also a tetraploid, which means it has twice as many chromosomes as the normal. That means you're going to have a bigger flower and you're going to have a heavier branch. This is called Godzilla. Same story, a hybrid, and it's going to be a tetraploid, and you're going to get a bigger flower and larger growth, heavier leaf structure. I'd like to show you something on this leaf that you may think is bad. It's called pleating or ruffling. It is a good sign. It's showing that there's differential growth of the cells, and this plant is really growing fast. So it's doing really well. It's not a negative thing if you see this in your garden. Or if you see that when you're buying a plant, it's not a disease, it's something very good. Now, when you get your plant at this time of the year, it's going to be in a pot. Probably a pot this size, a 1-gallon pot. My recommendation is leave it in this 1-gallon pot and wait till October, August, September, October time frame, because you don't want to disturb it now. You can put it in the garden and it will do perfectly fine, but once you disturb it, it probably will not bloom. So wait until your October time frame when it gets a little cooler and put it in the ground. If you want to grow it in a pot, leave it in a pot at this size right now, but once it starts to get cooler, August, late August, September, October, you can pot them up in these kind of containers. Notice these have holes in them. When you transfer your plant into a pot, if you're going to keep it in a pot for the duration, make sure the pot's at least a 3-gallon pot, because these grow fast and they're sort of like New Orleanians. They're good feeders, they like food and they like to grow. So this is the size pot you would need even if you just have one plant. What I do to conserve water is I buy these containers. This is a typical masonry mixing bowl. You find these not in the garden area. You find these like Home Depot or Lowe's, where you find concrete. This is the smallest size one, and the reason why I pick small size is because when you put soil or media in here and water, it gets very heavy. Notice I have 3 holes. So you can take a pot with Louisiana irises in it, like this one, and it does have holes, and you can put it in this container here. You can have maybe 2 or 3 even in this container, and put water up to this bottom of the hole, and then you can leave it like that, and you don't have to keep watering it. It's a way of conserving the water and keeping these wet at all times. And you can see these grow beautifully even in a pot this size. This pot and this plant is 1 year and it's ready to be repotted. You might also like to use this kind of a container. This container does not have holes in it, so if you decided you didn't want a big container like this, maybe you don't like the look of it, it looks kind of industrial, you can put it in a nicer pot that has no holes, and then you just put it in this pot like this, and you can put water up to 3 inches or so above the plant, and it will do absolutely fine, and you won't have to water it every day or every week. It'll stay wet like that, and it'll be wonderful and grows beautifully. Now, there are other ways of growing it. These Louisiana irises have been in the pots for over 2 years, and look how beautifully they're doing. These 2 pots do not have holes in them, and water them once and they stay wet, and you don't have to water them again and again and again, and you can see the plants love it. Keep them wet. They love to be wet, okay? And they love full sun. 8 hours of sun is great. If you don't have full sun, they might not be blooming as often or as much. But there are some of them that can grow even under oak trees. This particular one, this one's called Laura Louise, and I have it growing in my house under live oaks. So it only gets dappled sun, dappled shade, however you'd like to say it, but it's blooming beautifully. Notice what beautiful branching it has, and notice how it even has a second bud coming up, so it is doing really well. Each of these flowers, each of these areas here, nodes, whatever, they call them sockets, they have 2 buds in each, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. They start blooming at the top, and then they bloom bottom all the way up again and all the way up again. So one stalk like this will last a week or so with the number of blooms. Also, since there's 2, the top one will bloom out, and then the next one will take its place. This is beautiful branching, and that's something that you really should look for when you buy an iris, is the branching. Because in some irises, and I'll show you one over here, the branching is not good. This iris was developed in Louisiana by Rusty and Odemeyer, and Rusty had a beautiful job when she developed this plant. It's a cultivar. This plant was developed in Australia and New Zealand. People came over here in the 1960s and they loved our irises, and so they said, we're going to take some of these over to New Zealand and Australia and we're going to propagate them. So the largest really propagation activities now going on are really in New Zealand and Australia. The problem with that is that the New Zealanders like ruffles on their plants, on their flowers, and when the ruffles develop, the branching is so tight the buds can't open, so here it's not good. If you take the same plant and you'd bring it to, say, Tennessee and let that kind of climate and let it adjust to that climate, it would probably do really well. But in Louisiana, no, it does not do well. So my message is buy from local hybridizers. You can get them online, and you can buy them from the Greater New Orleans Iris Society. That way you're assured you get beautiful plants that will do well in this environment. Today we talked a little bit about growing your iris in a pot with holes, and we talked about growing your iris in pots without holes. But if you decide to take an iris this size and put it in a container like this, I'll show you what kind of medium you should use. In fact, you can use this medium in any size pot you choose. Irises they're heavy eaters. Let's face it, they're like New Orleanians. We love to eat, and they do too. So they like to have a high organic material, but not totally organic. If you have so much organic material, sometimes a pot will go sour. So what we would like to do is mix 50% of a high organic material and 50% of just a topsoil with a lot of sand, good drainage. All right, now you may think it's kind of cruel chopping off these at only about 3 inches tall here, but it isn't, because they'll come out and they'll do just fine. But the reason why I'm doing that is when the wind blows, there's a tendency to blow it and pull it out the ground just like that. So if you want to make sure that they stay in the ground or in your pot, chop them off. The thing is, you just put about 1 inch or so of soil or of media over them. You don't bury these deeply. So in order to keep them from coming out the ground before they actually get rooted good in, chop off the top 3 inches.